Good morning, and we start with today's topic, and this is the ventricular system. Now, see, as we know that CSF, right, that is cerebrospinal fluid. So, this is a fluid which is creating the internal environment, and it is very important for the nourishment, right? It is very important for the nourishment and the protection which is giving the cushion effect, right? It is giving the cushion effect to the brain. So that's why the CSF is extremely important. Now what really happens is that in CSF the entire circulation, how it starts and how it ends, so that's what we shall be doing. This is like a journey to the journey of the CSF. Right from the beginning till end we'll be covering it, along with some of the very important topics like say some of the areas which are like secretory or they are sensory, and they are located in such spaces of the brain that usually we miss those things. So today our entire attempt will be that with respect to the complete CSF journey, we'll also be talking about those important areas, and everything would be graphical so that it becomes extremely easy to understand, right? We'll start with where we left off last time. That is the medial surface, right? Last time we saw the medial surface of the brain, right? Medial surface. So if you're comfortable with medial surface, these things will be extremely easy. Just a very quick brief, right? What exactly we'll be learning in ventricular system, that there are two lateral ventricles, right? This would be the right and this would be the left lateral ventricle, right? Lateral ventricle, both of them, they'll be opening into the third ventricle, and then from third it will go into the fourth ventricle, and from fourth ventricle there'll be openings, that is foramen of Lashka and foramen of Megendie. Lashka is lateral, Megendie is medial, right? We'll be watching all these things in detail. And then cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius and foramen of Monro, which is called as interventricular foramen of Monro. This would be the system. But what would really happen is this would be the choroid plexus from which the CSF will be released. It will pass through all these things. There will be some very important areas which will be coming near, so that this cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius is not closed. It's a very narrow space, right? We'll watch it. But then there is release of some very important glycoprotein, like which will release, say, spondine, and though that glycoprotein spondine will keep the aqueduct open, right? So very interesting phenomena. Again, I'm telling, not necessary that all these things will be asked in exam, but if you go through this journey, you'll be fascinated by that, how the brain actually functions so beautifully, right? So let's start. This is the medial surface, right, which we talked about. Very quickly, we just go through some of the important areas which we'll be taking into consideration today, right? Starting with the easiest one, right? The easiest one, this one, the corpus callosum. Theek? Corpus callosum, connecting both half of the brain. And then there was fornix, right? We know about the fornix because that fornix which was connecting to the that mammillary body, right? This was the mammillary body, right? This is like a very high speed revision, mammillary body, because these are the areas which will be picking up today. Then there was septum pellucidum, right? When we said that this septum pellucidum, this one septum pellucidum, right? This is something which is a transparent membrane which is between two lateral ventricles, anterior horn, right? And in between, right, this is sometimes very confusing that what exactly it is, right? Because we know this part, right? This is what is called as the diencephalon, right? Diencephalon, which is consisting of thalamus, subthalamus, right? Hypothalamus, right? All those things, they will be going underneath it, right? But then when we say that this is a third ventricle, it becomes completely confusing that where is third ventricle, because this is the area of third ventricle, and then we put that, okay, here this portion is for thalamus and this is interthalamic adhesion. True, right? That is what really happens, right? I'm just circling it, right? This is interthalamic adhesions, right? Oh, this is not dinosaur, right? It was just an image. Interthalamic adhesions, right? That is there. We'll just have a look at it. Then there are some important recesses. Recess means space, all these things. We'll have a very proper look at it. Meantime, this is what? Optic chiasma, right? This much, if you remember, it's more than enough. Optic chiasma, this, so you can't miss. It is pituitary, right? It is pituitary, so that's fine. So corpus callosum, septum pellucidum, fornix, and the diencephalon, that would be where the thalamus would be there. Third ventricle, mammillary body, optic chiasma, pituitary. Okay, coming back to that part, right? This is what? Midbrain, right? This one was pons, and this is medulla oblongata, right? Now third, fourth cranial nerve, right? Over here, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth cranial nerve, and rest of them 9, 10, 11, and 12. They are over there, because today we'll be talking about one very special nerve, right? Which will be decussating with the opposite side in some very interesting areas. Okay, just behind the medulla oblongata, right? Because that is the thalamus. Over here, that was one what was called as the quadrigeminal plate, right? Quadrigeminal plate. Right? It was quadrigeminal plate. And this quadrigeminal plate was having two protrusions. You remember that? This one was superior, one was inferior, and was superior colliculus and the inferior colliculus, right? So this and this, right? One was superior and another one was inferior colliculus, right? Respectively, they are superior colliculus, that was for visual, and the inferior colliculus, that was for auditory, right? But this much is ready. Now we start with our ventricles. This is that image in which, say for example, we have taken all the ventricle system. We have removed all the components of the brain and just taken out the ventricular system, right? So first we'll understand that, and then gradually we'll keep on adding the rest of the brain structures, right, to make it completely easy. So this is what? This is a lateral view, right? This is a lateral view. So in that lateral view, right, here is, see this entire thing, right? That one is the lateral ventricle, right? So that's the lateral ventricle. So lateral ventricle will be on both the sides, right? So here is one lateral ventricle. So this is the right lateral ventricle. This is the right lateral ventricle, and this one would be the left lateral ventricle. Correct. Now this lateral ventricle, it has got horns. Very easy to know, easy to remember, because this is anterior, right? See, this is anterior, this is posterior, right? So anterior, this particular horn will be the frontal horn, right? This one would be the frontal horn. One who is on the back, so very rightly, this one would be the occipital horn. Correct. Now they are on both the sides, right? They are on both the sides. So very soon we'll be watching that where exactly that thalamus is, right? We are about to see that. So this is front and the occipital. Then very rightly, this one would be the central part. So this is the central part, right? And this one, which would be, that one would be the temporal, right? It's very easy. As per the bones, the names are there: frontal, occipital, and temporal. This central one is called as the central. Remember this particular area, right? This area. That area, it is called as the atria, right? Or the atrium. It is called as the atrium. Let me write it like this. So it is atrium. That is atrium of lateral ventricle. That's it, right? So this is frontal, central, atrium, and temporal, and the occipital. These are the parts of the lateral ventricle, right? So if we just mark this, so that's entire thing is the lateral ventricle, right? This one. This is third ventricle, right? This is third ventricle, because two lateral ventricles, so that is 1 and 2, and this one is the third ventricle. Achha. Third ventricle. This is this portion, right? It is the interventricular foramen. This is interventricular foramen. So think it like that this is lateral, they are opening into the third ventricle, right? From third ventricle to fourth ventricle, so this area is the third ventricle, right? Third ventricle. Then there is a duct, because this one is fourth ventricle. Fourth ventricle. So between third and fourth, that is called as the cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius. It is this. Over here, it is this, right? So that is cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius. Okay. And from fourth ventricle, it goes all the way down, right? And then it goes into the spinal canal. So that's the whole architecture, right? Now, about this, right, there are some projections. These are like lateral recess, right? These are the lateral projections of fourth ventricle, because that's where the foramen of Lashka, that's from where they will be opening into the subarachnoid space. Right? So we'll have a look at that from another perspective. Meantime, watch this. This is 1, this is 2, right? I'll just zoom this thing. See, you need to focus on these 4 points. I'm just writing. See, 1 over here, 1 over here, right? Let's draw it out here and here. These are the 4 spaces, right? This is what we'll be watching very properly. These are all recesses. Recess means there is a space and it goes like this. The moment I'll put rest of the organs, rest of the structures of the brain, immediately it would be clear, right? But let's know the name of it. The name, this above one, right? That one would be supraoptic. Now you remember optic chiasma, right? So there would be optic chiasma over here. So this would be very rightly called as the supraoptic, right? Supraoptic recess. Similarly, this one would be infundibulum, right? Don't worry, right? We'll put rest of the organs. Over here, there would be pineal gland, pineal gland which was for circadian rhythm, right? So this would be called as the suprapineal, right? And then just below, right, there would be the pineal recess, right? So thus these are the areas, and let's have a look from the other perspective, right? This is exactly the anterior view, right? This is the anterior view. Now in this anterior view, things will be much more clear, right? Say these are our lateral ventricles, right? These are the lateral ventricles. This is lateral ventricle. See how lateral ventricle is opening into this third ventricle, right? That third ventricle. Say these are the openings into the ventricles, third ventricle. And then this is what? Because this one would be the fourth ventricle, right? That one is fourth ventricle. So this one will be cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius, right? Cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius. And then here, here, and here. These are the lateral foramen, right? And this one would be the medial foramen. So that lateral one, they are called as the foramen of Lashka, right? On both the sides. L for lateral, right? Easy to remember. And this median one, it is called as the foramen of Megendie, right? Foramen of Megendie. So foramen of Lashka and foramen of Megendie, this is how the whole structure would be, right? Again, when we see it from the top view, right? This is the top view. So this entire one, this one would be the lateral. So now you know that lateral ventricles, they are the largest. They are the largest, and that's the reason that there would be the choroid plexus in it. So now I'm adding one more word. This is the choroid plexus, right? Choroid plexus is what will be releasing the CSF, correct? And then obviously rest is third ventricle and fourth ventricle, right? This one is the third ventricle, this one is the fourth ventricle. Easy to figure out, right? Okay. By the way, this is the atrium, right? This is the atrium. This is the atrium, right? So this one would be the temporal horn, right? Temporal horn. This one would be the occipital horn of lateral ventricle. And this one would be the frontal one, right? Frontal horn. And this is central piece, the central part. Correct? That's the central. So this is anterior and this one is posterior. So now I think you are properly oriented. Okay. Let's start with adding few more things. Now see, we have added just few things because over here now our concept for lateral ventricle is completely clear. Third ventricle is completely clear. So see, this is lateral, correct? Lateral. This one would be the third ventricle, right? This one would be the fourth ventricle, right? Let me change the color to make it more prominent. This one is the third ventricle. This one is the fourth ventricle, right? In between this narrow thing, that is cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius, right? That is cerebral aqueduct which is going behind. What I really want in this is, let's understand four important things, 4 points, right? Rest are all easy. This one is, see this part, right? This is supraoptic, because what was this, right? This is this one. This one was optic chiasma, correct? Optic chiasma. And this is, you just can't miss it, it is pituitary. Suddenly the whole thing is very easy. Those recesses, those spaces, right, which are going like this, so this part, right, that projection, this projection, right, projection which is going like this, right, this and this, right, here is optic chiasma. So this portion, right, I'll put it 1 here. So this is 1 here, right? That 1 is supraoptic recess, right? Remember, supraoptic recess, right? Very easy. The second one, which is over here, this one, right? See below, over here, there is pituitary, right? So this is called as the infundibular, right? So let's name it as 2, and 2 over here is this one, right? That is 2, and it is infundibular recess. Infundibular recess. So these 2 out of 4, these 2 are done. Rest of the 2, they are still easier, right? Extremely easy. Because one is this gland, this one, it is pineal. It is pineal gland, right? So just above this what we are getting, this part, right? That is called as the suprapineal recess. One small word, right? So getting some of the emails that why we are learning again in so much of detail, right? You'll understand the importance of this when you'll actually go for sectional radiology, or when you'll be going for that what really happens when things go wrong into the CSF circulation, how these areas they are obliterated and what really happens at that point of time, right? So do learn, right? It's like you draw it once or twice and you'll be able to remember it very crisply, right? So suprapineal recess, that is the third one, and the fourth, which is over here, right? Over here, this one, that is the simple pineal recess, right? This is the pineal recess. So we have got now four recesses: supraoptic, infundibular, suprapineal, and the pineal. Two anterior, two posterior, right? Rest of the horns, you know about it, right? This would be the frontal horn, this is central, and this is the atrium, this is occipital, and this is the temporal horn. Done, right? Let's add something more to this now, right? One very important concept, which we were telling, that this is the diencephalon, right? This is the diencephalon, and in diencephalon there is thalamus. Right? When the thalamus is there, we write thalamus over here like this, that this is the thalamus, this is interthalamic adhesion, and then on top of it we are telling that this is the third ventricle. Hai. When we watch it from the top, this is how it looks like. That basically this is one thalamus, this is another thalamus, right? And in between there is interthalamic adhesions. So this is exactly like that thalamus is there, and the third ventricle is sitting, and which is allowing this to pass through it, right? So we have got thalamus which is on both the sides, right? There is right thalamus and there is left thalamus, right thalamus and left thalamus. So when we watch it from the top, in fact this would be the right and this one would be the left, right? We are watching from the top. This thalamus, right, it has got so many important nuclei, but you should know at least one very properly. This is called as the pulvinar. When we'll be talking about the thalamus in detail, every nuclei will be discussed. Right? This is like a top view. Right? This is like a top view. So now we know that this thalamus, which is on both the sides, right, and there is this third ventricle, which goes, third ventricle is only one, right? Two lateral ventricles, they are opening into centrally placed third ventricle, and then there would be several nuclei, right? Total there will be 7, and pulvinar is the 8th one. So if we really divide them like this, right? So right now we'll not talk about, say, this is like ventro anterior, then this is ventro posterior, then ventro lateral, right? These are all nuclei. Then similarly there will be enterodorsal nuclei, right, or the medial dorsal, etc. So that's fine. This pulvinar, you just remember one nuclei. This is the top view. So on from both the sides there is thalamus, and this is interthalamic adhesion, right? So that's how it is connected. So it is this ventricle, third ventricle, is allowing that, okay, let these interthalamic adhesions pass through it, right? So and thus you have got a cavity, and that cavity which is connected to with two larger cavities on both the sides, both lateral ventricles opening into this third one. From here things are much easier. Clear? So that is the thalamus. Now I'll be using same image, right? So that we know very properly that where exactly or what exactly are we doing. Okay. So let's pick up one important structure, and that is the choroid plexus, right? Choroid plexus. This is the choroid plexus. This one, right? This is a bit thicker. So this one, yeah. That one is the choroid plexus, right? It is the choroid plexus. So we have got the choroid plexus in lateral ventricles. We have got the choroid plexus in, this is choroid plexus of third ventricle, right? Function, CSF production, right? CSF production. Aqueduct of Sylvius, which we saw. So this is the third one. This is the third ventricle, right? And this one is the fourth ventricle. So over here, this is a small duct which is going on, right? This is a small duct which is going on. So that is, now you are quite comfortable with it. And this is cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius, right? Cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius. Behind this is superior colliculus and inferior colliculus. You remember that, right? And in between this superior colliculus, inferior colliculus, and this cerebral aqueduct, there was quadrageminal plate, right? So whole system, whole unit. This is like cerebral aqueduct, right? This is quad plate, right? This is the quadrageminal plate, correct? Quadrageminal. And then you have got the superior colliculus and the inferior colliculus, right? So this is superior, which is for the vision, and this is the inferior colliculus, which is for the auditory. And all these things, they are going towards the thalamus, because thalamus is what? Thalamus is like a relay center, right? It's like a relay center. Except smell, every sensation will be coming over here. It will be analyzed like a central processing unit, then it will be sent to motor cortex for the further operations. Okay? See, in this, I'll zoom it because that's what we just saw, right? So let's see this. So this one will be, this is optic chiasma, right? So this one would be supra optic recess, one, right? And then once again, this is the second recess, right? This is the second space. So that one is infundibular recess, right? Here pituitary, I'll just write P over here. So pituitary is seen wonderfully, right? And think from the perspective of this third ventricle. So here is, see the projection, right? It is going like this, right? So that is suprapineal, and one which is going like this, that one is the pineal, right? Then right? So that is how things go. Clear? Now we go for, say, just let's clarify this part, this one, this. So that we said that it is septum pellucidum, right? Septum pellucidum. So septum pellucidum is like a thin transparent wall, right? Which is between those frontal horns of left and right ventricle. That is how those ventricles, they were there. In between, it is the wall, right? Thin transparent wall. Right? So between those frontal horns, or the anterior horn of right and left ventricles, that is right and left lateral ventricles, correct? So that was the, and above is what? Above, right? Above is, this is corpus callosum, right? This is corpus callosum, and below it is what? This is fornix. And the moment I say fornix, immediately mammillary body, they should come up into picture, right? Mammillary body, clear? Right? And when the mammillary body comes, that mammillary body straight away over here, it tells us this is the pituitary, right? And if it is pituitary, then over here, this is the optic chiasma, right? And then this is what? Midbrain. This one is the pons, this one is the medulla oblongata, right? And then midbrain, behind that, over here, quadrageminal plate, then superior colliculus, inferior colliculus, and in between cerebral duct of Sylvius, right? So things will become more and more easier as we keep on moving. Okay, let's talk about one very special thing. Very special thing. When we go for this time, we are zooming up on fourth ventricle. This is the fourth ventricle, right? The above part of the fourth ventricle. See, I'm highlighting it, right? This portion. And then there is a small portion which is going below. Let's change the color into that. This is a bit thicker. Give me a second. Right. This portion, this one. These two are superior and inferior medullary vellum. This is superior medullary vellum. Right? We just talk about this. And this one is the inferior medullary vellum. Right? Superior and inferior medullary vellum. The importance of this superior medullary vellum is that only one nerve, right, one cranial nerve, that is cranial nerve number 4, right, the trochlear nerve will decussate with the opposite nerve, right, opposite nerve through the superior medullary vellum, and then it will exit. So that's the speciality, right? So fit to width, I'll write it over here, right? So this is the fourth ventricle, right? And cranial nerve number 4, right? Trochlear. This trochlear will decussate with opposite nerve. Where? Over here. Through superior medullary vellum, right? And then that nerve exits. So just keep in mind this one important thing. We are now about to talk about something so fantastic, right? Usually not discussed much. But because it is neurology and it will help you a lot at a later stage, we are talking about now one of the pretty complex topic, and that is what is called as the circumventricular organs, right? But it is so interesting. So circumventricular organs, CVO. Now these circumventricular organs, they are special in that way that these are the structures, right, which will permit those hypothalamic hormones without disturbing the blood-brain barrier. This is something which is so cool, right? Understand again, right? There are various structures. There'll be 7 structures, and we'll be watching all the structures, right? And then there is a very nice classification, right? So what are they? These are the structures, right? These are the structures in brain, right, that allow what it will allow? It will allow polypeptide hypothalamic hormones. Hypothalamic hormones. But the speciality is without disturbing, without disrupting, without damaging, without making any changes in blood-brain barrier, without disrupting blood-brain barrier. So to see this thing, let's have a blank page and then we come back, right? So that we know that where we'll locate every part of it, right? So now this circumventricular organ, right, CVO, for our understanding, we'll divide it into 2 parts. One is sensory, one is sensory, and second one would be the secretory. Secretory, right? First one, something which you can never miss. This is area postrema. Postrema. What it will do? This is the center of vomiting, right? And it is called as the CPZ. That is chemo receptor. We like write like this, right? Chemoreceptor zone, right? This is chemoreceptor zone, and it's meant for, it is a vomiting center, right? Where is it? Let's see it. Location over here, right? We'll step by step we'll draw. This is the location, right? Let's take it in a black color. This is the location, this one, right? This is area postrema. See how important, right? And this one is the center for vomiting. So that is area postrema. We just name it as number one, right? Number one, so that you have got, this is over here. We have already marked it as one, right? This one, so that is area postrema. This is the first one. The next one, these are all sensory, right? Just let's add one page, duplicate page, and we clear it, because we'll be requiring pages. The second one, this is lamina terminalis. Now, we have talked about lamina terminalis, right? If you remember, right? Lamina terminalis. This is the location of lamina terminalis. This one, right? This one, this is the lamina terminalis. So we name it as number 2, right? Lamina terminalis. Now its full name is organum vasculosum, right? This is full name is, so but we are keeping it simple. Otherwise, I'll just write it. You remember lamina terminalis, it is enough, right? But organ of, that way, right? So it is organum of vasculosum. Vasculosum. So full name, it is short form, it is written like OVLT. Organum vasculosum of lamina terminalis. But this is the area, right? This is our second area. And remember, all these areas, they are collectively called as what? Circumventricular organs, right? Circumventricular organs are those organs which will allow all these polypeptide hypothalamic hormones without disrupting the blood-brain barrier. So what this will do, right? These are all sensory, right? So lamina terminalis, it senses what? It controls what? Osmolarity, right? So it is for osmolarity homeostasis. Homeostasis means the stability, right? Because brain is so sensitive, so that's why all these areas, they will be keeping the environment of the brain very, very proper, right? So this is lamina terminalis, which is handling this osmolarity homeostasis. The third one, see these three, they are the sensory, right? The next one is, you'll be able to guess it very easily, that where it should be. Subfornical organ. Subfornical. We know fornix. This is subfornical. So it has to be just below, right? What would be it doing? Cardiovascular regulation, right? Such an important function, right? Also, it is meant for energy homeostasis, right? Now, how all these things, right? It's a massive topic, right? But knowing even this much, it will be more than enough, right? Where exactly is this subfornical? You know where the fornix is, right? So let's zoom it, right? You know where the fornix is. Here is the fornix, right? This one is fornix. So subfornical, it has to be here. This is this portion. This is just underneath the subfornical, right? So that is our third one, subfornical organ. So these are, I'm writing, these are like all sensory, right? Number 1, number 2, and number 3. Correct? Area postrema for vomiting, laminar terminalis, which is for osmolarity, and subfornical organ, which is for cardiovascular regulation and the energy balance. Right? So these are the 3 sensory area. Now we move on to the 4 another areas, and they are secretory areas. Right? So we'll change the color. Suddenly the whole perspective will change, that brain even internally also it is working so meticulously. So if you are in electronics, right, you'll find that same thing happens. Then when there is CPU, so then there is south gate and north gate, right? And then from one, all those audio signals, then digital signals, then video signals, right? All those come, they are processed and they are sent to specific channels, right? And you get a display, you get a sound, same thing, right? They must have inspired from the brain itself, right? So these were all circumventricular organs. So they are like those gateways, they can communicate directly. They don't have to pass through that blood-brain barrier. When we'll be discussing, right, today only we'll be discussing blood-brain barrier. But in blood-brain barrier, so many things should happen, right? But over here, they are like gateways. They straight away work. So then now we come to the secretory part. We change the color for your convenience. So we are putting number 4. Number 4 means all are circumventricular organs. 1, 2, 3 we have done. So we are now moving on to the 4th one. And this would be like a beautiful revision of even the medial part of the medial surface of the brain. Right? This is subcommissural organ. Subcommissural. You remember? There were commissures, anterior commissure, posterior commissure, right? You remember that? Then there was habenular commissure, right? This is where it goes, right? So where is that subcommissural organ? Let's pick it up over here. See? Anterior commissure, posterior commissure, and this is subcommissural, and subcommissural is here. This one. This is subcommissural. Right? This one is subcommissural. Subcommissural. This is subcommissural organ. So we have got above, I'm just writing H. H was for habenular commissure, right? Just below it was the posterior commissure. Over here it was the anterior commissure, right? So this is subcommissural, right? Between both of them, and then behind it is this is what? That is the pineal, right? Pineal gland, which was for circadian rhythm. Even that is also one of this CVO. Right, but right now we are not marking it. Let's not confuse. So 1, 2, 3. This one is the 4th one. That is the subcommissural organ. Right. This subcommissural organ. See how smartly the things have been done. What is coming immediately now over here? We see that there's this cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius is coming. Now this cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius is so narrow. Right? It is so narrow. What if it is blocked, gone, right? This entire system would fail. So there has to be something which should create this particular aqueduct absolutely open, properly open. And there is one protein, right? And that is what is called as the spondine. Right? So, yeah. So what this subcommissural organ, such a small portion, but it will be releasing a glycoprotein, right? And that glycoprotein is spondine, right? Spondine. And what this spondine will do, it will maintain patency of that cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius, right? So wonderful, right? narrow space, so makes those fibers which are long strands, right, they will keep the duct open. So maintain cerebral aqueduct patent, right? Patent means open, right? It will keep it open. And cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius, it will keep it open. So this is next one, right? This we don't have to even talk much about it. It is pituitary. We say it pituitary. But to be specific, say in pituitary there were two parts, right? There were two parts, anterior and posterior. So we are right now not talking about the adenohypophysis. Adenohypophysis was the anterior one. We are talking about the posterior pituitary or the neurohypophysis, right? The neurohypophysis. So that is easiest. This is our anterior end, that's posterior, and this is our pituitary, right? That's the pituitary. So this one is the posterior pituitary, correct? Posterior pituitary. So that's our another CVO, right? Circumventricular organs. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, and this one is 5, right? Posterior pituitary. Pituitary, as it is so famous, right? So we are right now not entering into the detail that what posterior pituitary will be secreting, but we have already talked about that it is a neurohypophysis. The next one, right? The next one is the median eminence, right? It is the median eminence. Even this median eminence, that will be releasing those protein and the neurohormones, right? Hormones, neuronal hormones. The seventh one is the pineal, right? And pineal is important for the circadian rhythm, right? It is meant for the circadian rhythm. So that's how it will really go, right? So the thing is that all these are collectively called as the circumventricular organs, right? Now we move on to the final part, and that is the choroid, cerebrospinal fluid, its journey, where everything would be picked up, starting from choroid plexus, right? So this is how it goes. Choroid plexus. So what exactly is the choroid plexus? Choroid plexus is nothing but the pia mater. It is the invagination of pia mater into ventricles, right? So see the conceptual thing. There will be two components of choroid plexus, right? So we'll first what it is invagination of pia mater, right, into ventricles, right? So that's the choroid plexus. Two components. We write it here only, right? Two components of choroid plexus. One, highly vascularized this pia mater, right? And second one would be the choroid epithelium. Two things, right? So highly vascularized. Why it should be vascularized? Why should it be vascularized? Because as such, the CSF would be produced by diffusion and active transfer, right? Diffusion and active transfer of that arterial blood. So from that CSF would be squeezed out, right? So that's why it has to be highly vascularized connective tissue, right? Connective tissue of pyometer, right? Pyometer. And second is the choroid epithelium, right? Choroid epithelium. So that choroid epithelium, that will be continuous with the glial cell membranes, right? Because glial cell membrane is doing what? Glial cell membrane is a lining of ventricle, right? So think it like that, say these are the ventricles, right? Ventricles, they are lined by glial cells, right? In histology, we have talked this about this glial cells, right? So these are the membranous cells. It will be in continuation with it, right? So it will be continuous with it, with glial cells of ventricles, right? And they are lining the ventricle, right? They are lining the ventricle, correct? So this is what forms blood CSF barrier, right? Putting in simple words, that here is the blood vessels, and through these blood vessels, by the process of diffusion and the active transfer, right? And the active transfer, the CSF would be oozed, right? It will come out. And then these are the glial cells, right, which will be forming. So this will be the choroid epithelium. This will be the choroid epithelium. So thus it is creating the barrier between blood and the CSF environment. Correct? So now the CSF has been released. Right? CSF has been released. So this is like lateral ventricles, they will release they will be having choroid plexus. Third ventricle is having choroid plexus, right? So they release the CSF. So this CSF, as it comes into the third ventricle, right? So from lateral ventricles to third ventricle, from there it will come into fourth ventricle, right? So far things are good. But then from third ventricle to fourth ventricle, this is aqueduct of Sylvius, that also we saw. But then the lateral and the medial foramen, right? So foramen of Lashka, foramen of Megandy, foramen of Lashka, that's the point where they enter into the subarachnoid space, right? So here, because we know that there is pia matter, there is arachnoid matter, there is dura matter, and CSF is present into this subarachnoid space, right? So this is arachnoid, this is dura, this is pia, and this is where the CSF is, because CSF is surrounding the brain, right? It is giving nutrition, it is giving that cushion effect, right? So when there is impact, right? So at that point, it is this cushion effect which will be helping it. At the same time, right, we'll just write also, at the same time we know that there are no lymphatics in the brain. So what about the waste products? So that is what is picked up and removed by the CSF. It will act as a conduit, it will act as a pipeline through which all those waste products will be eliminated, right? So from here it will come into that subarachnoid space. Now, once it comes into that subarachnoid space, we know that from there, it will go into the dural venous sinuses, right? Something which we discussed at length. And then from there, it is reabsorbed, right? It is resorbed by arachnoid villi, right? Arachnoid villi. So finally, they are put into dural venous sinuses. From dural venous sinuses, all of them, they will be going into the venous system, right? Finally, into the internal jugular vein, and it goes, right? See how interesting that is, starting from the arterial system, right? Starting from the arterial system, right? Arteries, where by the diffusion and the active transport, it comes into the formation of CSF. That CSF, it has got all this ventricular system, right? Through ventricular system, it goes into the subarachnoid space, right? Giving nutrition, giving nutrition, giving protection, picking up the lymphatic, I mean, there are no lymphatics, so picking up the waste products, and then finally draining into dural venous sinus and going into the veins. And then once it is into the vein, then body has got its own system for all these waste removal, especially the liver, etc. They will be taking care of it, right? So this is how the entire journey goes. When we talk about the CSF functions, right, just to know, one, because CSF will be having water, amino acids, glucose, right, so it would be best would be the nutrition or the nourishment, right, nourishment, correct. So it gives water, amino acids, right, amino acids, then say glucose, right, how can we forget that, glucose, and so many things, right, they will be given. Second, cushion effect, right, cushion effect. So important, when there is head injury, right, this cushion effect will be taking care of it. And the third one, because no lymphatics in brain, right, in brain there are no lymphatics, so it is the CSF, it is the CSF which will be acting like a conduit, right, acting like a conduit. So what conduit is? Conduit means pipeline, right? Conduit means simply a pipeline. So things are drained into it and then it is carried, right, to remove, right, to remove waste products, to remove waste products, right. And finally, so as such, it is landing into the venous system, and that's how it goes, right. And over and above, as we talked about, that it maintains that homeostasis, right, the balance, the internal environment of the brain, that is preserved, right. So that's it. This is what was for today, right. That is the entire CSF journey, along with the areas which are important, along with those supportive areas in the form of circumventricular organs and rest of the structures which are part and parcel of this entire system. Right. Do revise this very properly. Right. It's a very important part and the system of the brain. Right. Tomorrow we'll come up with another topic. So thank you so much and see you tomorrow, and take care. Thank you and bye bye. And I'm putting this file into our folder, right? I just saved it and putting into our shared folder. Thank you and bye bye. No, there are no changes in the schedule. Just it was for one day only, right? There is no change. So instead of yesterday's session, that's what we have taken today, right? Tuesday. But from tomorrow to as per our Wednesday, Friday and Saturday, right? No change. Just it was for today only. Otherwise, there is no change. Right? So tomorrow it's Wednesday. We'll meet. All right. Thank you and bye bye.